Kyle MacLachlan, you starred in Twin Peaks: The Return, 25 years after the original series and the film Fire Walk with Me. Now, I actually hadn't seen the series originally, but I binged it, including Fire Walk with Me and The Return, everything last fall. So first off, what do you recommend as good psychological detox from that much pure uncut David Lynch?
I'm my hat's off to you, because that's a lot of Lynch to mainline in a very short period of time. I know the thing right now is to binge watch, and I do the same thing. But I think with something like this new Twin Peaks, I think that binge watching can sometimes kind of take your brain and just sort of smatter it all against the walls, because there's just so much going on. And I think the only way you can really detox from that is just to continue and watch more and more and more, and will come and resuscitate you when you're finally collapsed.
Yeah, it's definitely a matter of digging in so deep you come out the other end. That feels very David Lynch.
Yeah, it's very true. That's very true. The original series was intended to be an 18-hour experience, really, and David broke it into 18 parts. But I think of them, and I think he does as well, they're considered one entire opus,
And I'm certainly not alone in terms of people discovering the original series after the fact. Did you imagine after those two seasons that originally aired and the film that people would still be discovering it even after all this time?
I did. I figured that anything that David Lynch creates is going to stand the test of time, I think, and that's true. I think in all of his work, including Twin Peaks, the original Twin Peaks. I knew that was going to be around for a long time. The characters are just so interesting, and the story and the journey is so wonderful, and he asks of you to think of things in many, many different ways, and to mull them over and turn them around in your brain, and so I knew that was going to happen. It's certainly true of Blue Velvet and all of his other works, things that we've done together, and especially true of the new season. I think it's one of those and there's been some fantastic things written about on all over the place about it, as well as inspiring a lot of artists, painters, people who draw, poets, people who are inspired by creating the characters themselves in tableaus. He just continues to infuse people with his creative spirit.
And watching the series as a whole last fall, it was interesting to me how I was able to see how Twin Peaks kind of influenced the golden age of TV. I could sort of feel its influence in stuff that came after it that I'd already seen. Did it feel like really ahead of its time when you made it? Both then and now.
In the actual process of making it was certainly different and interesting. I remember you're talking now about the first go around, I guess, right? Yes. Very just kind of unusual situations that the characters would find themselves in, and the storylines were sort of a little bit different than I think anything I'd seen. I don't think we anticipated that it would have the impact that it did, and ultimately the staying power that it did. But it certainly has provided inspiration for so many people who have ideas and creative instincts of their own that they sometimes aren't certain if how the general public is going to respond. And I think David opened the door wide open, really, for all manner of interpretation and creativity. That I over the years, many people have come to me, people that I've worked with, very creative people, and have said to them how much influence Twin Peaks had upon them, simply with the idea that what they were thinking about, what they were envisioning, what they were wanting to create was actually allowed, and there was a place for it. And of course, as television fractured and we became had all these other options in terms of where you could go to find a story that spoke to you. David sort of said, yeah, here we go. We sort of set the pace on ABC, of all things. But now with everything that's available to people, they can certainly find an area that people will follow,
And David Lynch's work is so unlike anybody else's work. And sometimes very abstract and unusual. How much of a leap of faith is it, just generally just jumping into anything he does? You've worked with him multiple times. Is it just like jumping out of a plane without a parachute?
Oh, I trust him absolutely in every manner. I trust him, to take us on a journey that is something that. And I think I almost expect it. I want to go on a journey that I've never gone on before. And David is certainly the person that you want to ride with when you do that. And you're bound to go into places that are experimental and unexpected, and just so much freedom to create and bring to each character your own intuition, really. And so that's one of the joys. And I think you'll speak to all the actors that have worked with David. I think they'll say exactly the same thing. That is a sense of freedom in working in that environment with him, and the sense of a joy and the great pleasure in the creative process.
And as an actor, playing a character or playing multiple characters, as is the case in The Return, is it ever difficult to find your motivation with the storytelling that's often that abstract?
No, it's pretty clear, actually. As you read, at least for me, as I read through the script of what's going on. And David writes just spectacularly interesting dialogue in situations, and the expected is not what he's looking for most of the time. It's a different angle. It's something that would surprise you, and so. That alone is worth, in terms for me, is worth the journey going with him. So,
and does working in a more abstract kind of story prepare you in any way for other roles? It's like, if you can do this, you can do pretty much anything.
There is probably some truth to that. Certainly within the last what we just recently did, the option or the opportunity, I should say, to play 3 different characters so different was really a pleasure. I almost felt like I was doing repertory theater, in fact, because I would come in and there were each of these different beings that I would inhabit were so different and so fun. And had I stuck with one during the entire 10 months of filming, I don't know what would have happened. Maybe my head would have exploded. But the idea to be able to wrangle 3 or more was so much fun.
And this is a big 18-hour production, all of it directed by David Lynch, all of it co-written by him and Mark Frost. You've worked with him, of course, before David Lynch, but is this like the most concentrated amount of time you've spent working with him on any one project?
I would say so, yeah. To be honest, Dune, which was our first collaboration together way back in the early 80s, was similar only because the filming I was in Mexico City for 7 months, so it was quite a long period of time. But certainly day to day like this and working with David so closely, yes, this was the most concentrated time. And I got to say, it was probably, it may turn out to be the highlight of my career, simply because the opportunity to be with him and working with him, such a brilliant mind, such an incredible director. It was just bliss, really. I mean, I would go to work every day, regardless of how much sleep I had the night before, or how early the call time was, with a big smile on my face and excitement. I was excited as an artist to be able to join with David and create this, what I think has turned out to be something really spectacular with the new Twin Peaks.
And a lot of critics really responded well to The Return, including a lot of film critics who've been fans of David Lynch and kind of wanted to claim Twin Peaks as their own, like an 18-hour movie. This blurring of the edges between TV and film that we've been seeing in recent years, how's that felt, and how do you feel about Twin Peaks fitting now into that sort of?
Oh, I completely agree with them. I think it's meant to be experienced in 18 hours, which, many people did. Recently, there was a marathon and they went all the way through everything. And it's, as you said, it's a lot to take in. It's a lot to digest. So you sort of have to, I think, pace yourself in some ways, which is probably good that it was broken into 18 hours. But I think you could certainly approach it as a film, as one long film. And that was always David's, I believe, always his intention. And certainly the way the script was structured, there were no breaks that came, or moments in the script where you felt like this needed to be set apart from anything else. It was all meant to be enjoyed in one giant chunk.
And do you think you'd ever like to revisit Twin Peaks and Dale Cooper again in the future, or does it feel like this kind of closes the book on it?
You know, he is a character that continues to fascinate me with the audience as well, the audience of Twin Peaks. And I think there's always something to explore there with him. So were David to decide that he wanted to make more, I would certainly be first in line to sign up. I wish I had a more definitive answer about what David's thinking, but only David knows what David is thinking.
Yeah, I don't think anyone has a definitive answer about what David is thinking at any time, so that's half the fun.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, you this past January, you were nominated for a Golden Globe for The Return, and you actually won a Golden Globe for the original run of Twin Peaks. What was it like to get that recognition again from that group and to be able to celebrate the series in that way?
It was really extraordinary to have the nomination again. I think we charted 26 or 27 years after the original. We weren't sure if that had ever happened before, but it was really spectacular. And, you know, speaking with many of the members of the Hollywood Foreign Press, I mean, they love film, they love David Lynch, they love television, they love everything that comes with that. So they were very passionate about their feelings and their opinions, and they were really, I mean, everyone was, when they came to speak with me, were very excited about what David had created. And it's nice to be welcomed into that community with that enthusiasm, I'll tell you.
And you know, in the era of revivals, we're seeing a lot of shows come back and a lot of you know, properties, you know, revived that you know, people have loved in the past. Are there any other roles in your career, or maybe even in your workings with David Lynch, that you'd love to revisit again sometime if the opportunity came?
You know, I always wonder whatever happened to Jeffrey Beaumont in Blue Velvet and where he ended up. Some people think he sort of transitioned somehow into Dale Cooper and showed up in Twin Peaks. But, you know, David's stories are, and the worlds that he creates are ongoing, I feel, and they never stop. So these characters are alive somewhere and living on. And yeah, it would be really kind of a challenge and interesting to revisit them and see where they are at this point.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things watching Twin Peaks is that it almost felt like you could almost imagine David Lynch's cinematic universe, where every single film and TV show he's ever made is sort of part of the same fractured universe. You know, so I'd almost want it to be like the Avengers of David Lynch at some point.
That's a great idea. Let's do that.
What are your thoughts on you know, that the ending of The Return was very unusual, you know, par for the course, and you know, what do you think about it now, looking back at it? You know, what kind of analysis in your mind do you have of what that meant? You
know, I try not to analyze too much, or try to think of you know, how this what this all means too much. You know, this is I mean, for me, this is a character of Cooper who is you know, he's kind of in some ways like just an old-fashioned lawman, you know, and he's going after the bad guy. And in this particular case, it jumps through different, I don't know if you want to use the word dimensions, but other places, let's say. And I think he has taken it upon himself to journey off into this place to right a wrong and what he feels to be a wrong. And he's in the process, he may have overreached his abilities, and we don't know. You know, we don't know how we've left him. I trust and feel that he's a man who's able to get himself out of any jam at all. So, you know, hopefully he will find his way back. But I do think that he has, I think, untethered himself from the craft and launched himself on this attempt, really, because he feels it's the right thing to do. he's taken it upon himself to do it. So it's kind of it's a hero's journey for sure. We're left, as you said, sort of with an uncertain feeling as to how it's all going to, work its way out. But you never know.
And what do you hope viewers will take away from these 18 hours? As when they watched it, whether they watched it piecemeal or like me, kind of not all at once, but in a faster kind of method. What do you hope viewers will take from it?
Oh, I think simply going on the journey is the experience that David wants you to have, and to, as he's said many times, to come to your own conclusions. Let it work its way into your psyche in however you will allow it to get in there, and change you and make you think and wonder about relationships. And it's a lot of times I just when I speak of David, I think of him as he's an artist working with moving canvas. And I think it's all about the experience, the relationship that you have, your personal relationship with what you see that's working, that's going on in front of you. And that can be many things, as merited by what I see. So many people, when they send out contributions, mostly social media, about how it's inspired them, either visions or ideas or thoughts or tangential ideas. And they continue, there's a continual outpouring of this kind of creativity that I think has been inspired by David. I know it's been inspired by David. So fun to be on that journey with him. Fun to be the object of some of that art.
Well, I want to congratulate you on Twin Peaks: The Return, and you never know, maybe in another 25 years, The Return. And thank you so much for talking to me today.
A great pleasure. Thank you for having me on.